Rain was pouring down Manhattan like the city itself wanted to wash her away. Inside a glass-walled law office on Fifth Avenue, Grace Miller sat across from her husband, Cole Harrington, a man whose voice could slice through silence like a blade. "Sign it, Grace," he said coldly, sliding a stack of papers toward her with his Mont Blanc pen resting neatly on top. His Rolex gleamed each time lightning flashed outside, as if even time belonged to him. Grace's fingers trembled. Beneath the oversized coat wrapped tightly around her, she was hiding a small bump, barely visible but real, their baby. The one thing she hadn't told him about yet, because every time she tried, he found a new way to humiliate her. Sloane Pierce, Cole's new PR manager and the woman everyone in the office whispered about, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, lips curved into a cruel half-smile. "Make it quick," she murmured. "He's got a charity dinner at the plaza in 30 minutes. Minute." Grace's chest burned. The ink on the papers blurred as her tears hit the page. Every clause was a reminder that Cole had already replaced her. He was buying silence, not freedom. "If I don't sign," she whispered. Cole didn't blink. "Then I'll drag you through court until you can't afford the cab fare back to Queens. You'll leave with nothing." Grace swallowed, the taste of metal in her mouth. Her hand reached for the pen, but before she could, her phone buzzed. A message from her doctor glowed across the iPhone screen. "Congratulations, the test confirmed. You're 8 weeks along." She froze. The air left her lungs. Cole glanced at her phone, then back at her. His jaw tightened. "Don't tell me that's what I think it is," he hissed. Sloane smirked, stepping closer. "She's trying to trap you again." Grace's heart shattered. No one would believe her. Not after Cole's carefully curated image as the perfect husband, the generous investor, the man everyone admired at charity galas. She looked at the pen again, shiny, cold, final, and signed her name. Cole snatched the papers before the ink dried. "Good choice," he said, turning to leave. "Oh, and by the way, I've canceled your insurance. Don't expect any help." When the door closed, Grace sat there in silence. Rain pounded harder against the glass. Her reflection stared back at her pale, shaking, pregnant, and utterly alone. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the positive pregnancy test she'd carried like a secret blessing, and ripped it in half. The sound was small, but it felt like thunder in her chest. Outside, her heels splashed through puddles as Cole's black Mercedes glided past, taillights glowing red like an open wound. Grace stood under the Plaza Hotel's golden lights, soaking wet, clutching the torn test in her palm. Her breath hitched, her stomach twisted, and one thought screamed in her mind. "He took everything, but not my future." And with that, she stepped into the storm. The next morning, the rain had turned to mist, hanging over the city like a ghost that refused to leave. Grace Miller stood on the corner of Lexington Avenue, her suitcase soaking through, her breath visible in the cold. Her phone showed one text from her mother in Ohio, the kind that cut deeper than silence. "You chose money over love. Grace, don't come home." She stared at the message until the words blurred. It wasn't just a rejection, it was exile. With nowhere else to go, she scrolled through her contacts until she saw one name that still meant safety: Maya Brooks. College roommate, the kind of friend who'd once shared instant noodles and dreams in a cramped dorm. Grace hesitated, then hit call. "Maya, it's me." There was a long pause on the other end. Then a quiet gasp. "Grace, where are you? You sound, I just need somewhere to stay for a few nights. Please." 2 hours later, Grace stood in front of a peeling brick apartment building in Queens. Maya ran down the stairs barefoot, wrapped her in a hug before Grace could even speak. "You're freezing. Get inside." The apartment smelled like coffee and cinnamon candles. A chip table sat by the window with 2 steaming Starbucks cups. "Drink," Maya said softly. "Then tell me everything." Grace's voice cracked as she explained. The divorce, the pregnancy, the lies, the humiliation. Maya didn't interrupt, just reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then we start over," she said. "But you have to promise one thing: you can't let him see you fall apart." Grace nodded, but inside, she was breaking. That night, she sat on the narrow futon in Maya's spare room, her phone buzzing again. It was a bank notification. Account frozen. Cole had shut down the joint account before the check from her old job cleared. She was left with $74 and a Metro card that might get her through the week. Her iPhone pinged again, a message from a blocked number. "You thought you could hide? I always win. C.H." Her heart stopped. She turned off the phone, tossed it on the bed, and pulled the blanket over her knees. Outside, traffic hummed, indifferent to her collapse. In the dim light, she noticed the sonogram photo peeking out of her bag. She traced the tiny curve on the screen with her thumb, whispering, "I'm sorry you have to start life like this." But somewhere under the exhaustion, a flicker of defiance rose. Cole wanted her scared, dependent, erased. That couldn't happen. Not now. Not with someone else's heartbeat inside her. The next morning, she walked into a small clinic near Roosevelt Avenue. Dr. Anaya Patel, a calm woman with gentle eyes, greeted her. After the checkup, she said quietly, "Your blood pressure's unstable. You need rest and peace, or you could lose this baby." Grace nodded, tears slipping down. "Peace," she repeated, as if saying it could make it real. Dr. Patel handed her a small pamphlet titled Healing After Emotional Trauma. Grace tucked it into her bag next to her cracked phone. That night, Maya found her awake, staring at the ceiling. "I'm scared," Grace whispered. Maya sat beside her. "Then be scared. But don't give up. Fear means you still have something to lose, and that means you still have a future." Grace exhaled, clutching her belly. She opened her laptop, the screen flickering to life, and began typing a new resume. She deleted Mrs. Harrington from the name line and replaced it with Grace Miller. Her reflection stared back from the black screen for a moment, tired, swollen-eyed, but alive. Outside, the city hummed with a million dreams colliding in the dark. Grace pressed save and whispered, "Tomorrow starts here." And for the first time in months, she believed it. Snow was falling that morning, thin and sharp like powdered glass. Grace Miller sat in Maya's kitchen, a hand pressed to her swollen stomach, stirring oatmeal she could barely afford. Every sound in the apartment echoed too loudly: the radiator, the leaky faucet, the faint hum of traffic outside. She was 8 months along, exhausted, and still working late nights on her old MacBook to finish freelance design gigs that barely covered rent. When the first contraction hit, she thought it was just fatigue. The second came harder, sharp enough to make her drop the spoon. "Maya," she called, voice trembling. Maya rushed in, eyes wide. "It's time." Grace nodded, gasping. "Too soon. I still have 3 weeks." Snow was coming down faster now, clogging the streets. The Uber app on Maya's iPhone kept showing, "No drivers available." Panic spread. Maya grabbed her jacket. "We'll try the main road." By the time they reached the corner, Grace could barely stand. Her breath came in ragged bursts, steam against the freezing air. Finally, a black SUV stopped an off-duty Uber driver who recognized her distress. "Hospital?" he asked. "Lenox Hill," Maya shouted, helping Grace into the back seat. The ride was chaos, horns blaring, tires sliding, Maya timing contractions on her phone. Grace clutched the seatbelt and whispered through the pain, "Please, just let her be okay." But halfway up FDR Drive, the pain turned unbearable. Her water broke. Maya screamed for the driver to pull over, but it was too late. In the cramped back seat, under the white haze of the snowstorm, Grace gave birth to her daughter. No doctors, no monitors, just courage and a stranger's trembling hands passing her a clean jacket to wrap the baby. When the wailing stopped, Grace looked down and saw the tiniest pair of eyes blinking up at her, alive, fragile, perfect. "Lila," she whispered. "Your name is Lila." At the hospital, Dr. Anaya Patel met them at the door. "You're lucky," she said gently as nurses rushed them inside. 5 more minutes, and it could have gone differently. Jobly, Grace lay in the bed afterward, IV in her arm, Lila sleeping against her chest. The smell of disinfectant filled the room, but to her it smelled like safety. Maya sat nearby, scrolling through messages. "Cole's foundation is on the news again," she muttered. "He's hosting another charity gala at the plaza." Grace's face went pale. She turned her head toward the TV mounted on the wall. There he was, smiling in a tuxedo beside Sloane, champagne in hand, a headline reading, "Power Couple Raises Record Funds for Children's Health." Children's health. The words stung like salt. Grace reached for the remote and turned the screen away. Her voice shook. He'll never know about her. Not until she's old enough to choose if she wants to. Dr. Patel returned, holding a clipboard. Your blood pressure's stabilizing. You can go home in 2 days. But Grace, promise me you'll rest. You're still healing. Grace smiled weakly. I don't have that luxury. Not yet. That night, after everyone left, she lay awake watching the snowfall outside her hospital window. Lila stirred softly, her tiny fingers curling around Grace's. The city glowed faintly beyond the glass, beautiful, distant, uncaring. Grace whispered, I don't know how we'll make it, but we will. She thought of the torn pregnancy test, the empty apartment, the threats, the humiliation. None of it mattered anymore. This child was her proof of life. In the quiet room, she reached for her phone and typed a message to herself. Remember this night. You survived. Then she pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead and said, We start over tomorrow. The first months after bringing Lila home blurred into a single loop of feedings, diaper changes, and survival. Grace Miller barely slept. Every morning, she boiled bottles on the stove and prayed the power wouldn't shut off before payday. The Queen's apartment was small, the walls thin enough to hear neighbors arguing through them. But it was safe, and safety was something she hadn't felt in a long time. By day, she walked Lila through the neighborhood in a second-hand stroller she'd found on Facebook Marketplace. By night, she sat at the kitchen table, her old MacBook whirring like it was begging for rest, designing logos and social media ads for small businesses. Her clients were kind but broke tiny bakeries, hair salons, thrift stores, people like her, scraping by. Maya often came home from work with groceries. Eggs, milk, and I stole a few sugar packets from Starbucks, she'd joke. Grace would smile faintly, though inside she felt like she was failing everyone who tried to help. One evening, as snow melted into gray slush on the streets, Grace received an email from a Brooklyn bakery that needed rebranding. We can't pay much, the owner wrote. But if you help us, I'll make sure your baby has fresh bread every week. Grace said yes. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about dignity. For weeks, she worked while Lila slept, sketching designs by hand because her laptop's trackpad had stopped working. She researched colors, wrote slogans, and photographed the owner smiling in front of his bread ovens. When the campaign launched, something extraordinary happened. The bakery went viral. Local blogs picked up the story. Young mother reinvents family bakery in Brooklyn. Grace didn't expect the attention, but for the first time in years, her name meant something other than scandal. Orders doubled for the bakery, and the owner slipped an envelope into her hand one morning. It's not much, but it's yours, he said. Inside was $500 more than she'd seen at once in months. With trembling fingers, she bought a refurbished iMac and a used iPhone 11 so she could take better photos. The next day, she opened a small business account and registered her freelance brand, Miller and Muse Studio. But every step forward came with a reminder of what she'd lost. That week, Cole's name appeared again, this time in a legal notice. A law firm representing him sent a letter demanding she cease any use of creative materials that overlap with prior intellectual property developed under Harrington & Co. Maya slammed the paper on the table. He's trying to scare you, Grace. He can't own your talent. Grace's hands shook. He doesn't need to. He just wants to remind me he still can reach me. Dana Cho, the lawyer Maya had once interned for, agreed to look over the case pro bono. He's fishing, Dana said after reading. There's no real claim. But Grace, keep every receipt, every email, every design. If this escalates, you'll need proof. So Grace started documenting everything. Every invoice. Every late-night sketch. Every cent spent on diapers or formula. Her life became a trail of digital evidence, orderly, precise, ready for the day she'd have to defend herself again. That night, while feeding Lila under the soft glow of a thrifted lamp, Grace whispered, "We're not victims, we're building." Lila's tiny hand gripped her finger, as if answering. Grace exhaled, looking out the window at the Manhattan skyline in the distance. It felt impossibly far, glittering like a world she once belonged to and might never touch again. But she wasn't the same woman who signed those papers. She was something new, quiet, steady, unbreakable. And deep down, she knew Cole would hate that most of all. The first real sunlight of spring spilled through the window as Grace Miller sat at her small desk, finishing another project. Her daughter Lila giggled from the playmat beside her, stacking blocks that always seemed to topple faster than Grace could catch them. Life was far from easy, but it finally felt stable, steady, predictable, almost peaceful, until the letter arrived. It came in a thick white envelope with embossed lettering, Harrington, Lowe, and Associates. Grace froze the moment she saw Cole's name printed beneath the logo. Her stomach twisted as she tore it open. The letter was polite, too polite. It reminded her that Cole had full rights to all creative assets produced during their marriage and suggested she voluntarily discontinue operations of Miller and Muse Studio to avoid legal escalation. The final line hit like a slap. A cooperative resolution will reflect favorably on your future custody considerations. Custody considerations. The words burned. Maya found her an hour later, sitting motionless, the paper crumpled in her fist. "He's not serious, right?" "Oh, he's serious," Grace whispered. "He's always serious when he wants to scare me." They took the letter to Dana Cho's tiny office in Manhattan. The space smelled of coffee and printer toner, a MacBook humming on the desk beside a neat stack of legal pads. Dana read every line, her expression hardening. "He's bluffing," she said. "There's no court order, no signature. It's intimidation dressed as legality. But the custody threat, he's testing you. He wants to know if you'll fold, don't." Grace sat back, rubbing her temples. "Dana, he has money, connections, press." "I have truth," Dana interrupted firmly. "And a paper trail. You've built this business after the divorce. Every dollar, every client, every logo, it's yours. Keep your records clean, Grace. Document everything. We make ghosts until you're too strong to touch." That night, Grace stayed up scanning receipts, invoices, emails, anything that proved Miller and Muse was hers alone. Lila slept soundly in the corner, her little chest rising and falling. Grace's apartment glowed with the light of her iMac as she organized digital folders named Proof 1, Proof 2, Everything. At 2 a.m., an email pinged into her inbox. No subject line, just a link. She hovered the mouse, hesitating. Curiosity 1. It opened to a tabloid photo. Cole and Sloane standing arm in arm at the river caf, laughing beneath fairy lights. The caption read, "Power couple expands empire." Beneath it, a comment in bold letters, "He moved on because you were never enough." Her heart pounded, hands shaking. It had to be from him. The cruelty was his signature. She closed the laptop and pressed her palms to her eyes, forcing the tears back. By dawn, she'd made a decision. She couldn't live reacting to Cole forever. She'd build higher walls, legal, emotional, and financial. She called Dana that morning. "File the business trademark," she said. "Make Miller and Muse official." "Po?" Dana paused. "That's a big step." Grace stared at the horizon beyond the Queen's skyline. So was leaving him. The paperwork took weeks. But when the confirmation email arrived, she cried for the first time in months, not from pain, but relief. The name Grace Miller was now on legal record, independent and untouchable. Later that night, she framed the certificate above her desk. Maya brought takeout and 2 cheap glasses of wine. "To new beginnings," Maya said, clinking her cup against Grace's. Grace smiled. "To never going back." Outside, the city glimmered like it was watching. Somewhere, Cole would see that name trending again, and this time, he couldn't silence it. And for the first time, Grace wasn't afraid of him anymore. Spring melted into summer, and for the first time in years, Grace Miller felt a rhythm returning to her life. Lila, now a curious toddler, toddled through the apartment holding her stuffed bear, humming nonsense songs while Grace typed proposals late into the night. Her studio, Miller and Muse, was finally picking up steam-steady clients, word-of-mouth referrals, small but real money. Still, New York City didn't care about dreams, it cared about rent. One late Friday night, Grace sat at her desk with a stack of unpaid bills and half a cup of cold coffee. The math didn't work. The bakery client had delayed payment, and her laptop fan sounded like it was begging for mercy. She rubbed her eyes, whispering, "Come on, just one good break." The next morning, it came by accident. She was waiting in line at a small bakery in Brooklyn when she overheard the owner crying on the phone. "I can't keep this place open another month. I've tried everything." Grace's instincts kicked in. She stepped forward. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to eavesdrop, but maybe I can help. Par. The owner blinked through tears. You do marketing? I run a design studio. Small, but passionate, Grace said, handing over her card printed on cheap recycled paper. Let me rebrand you for free. You pay me later if it works. That night, she stayed up reworking the bakery's logo, color palette, and menu design. She shot photos with her used iPhone, capturing details: the golden crust of bread, the owner's flour-dusted hands, the warmth of the shop at sunrise. She posted a campaign on Instagram, Where New York Smells Like Home. Within a week, orders tripled. Bloggers came. Then local news. Miller and Muse was credited for reviving a dying bakery in the heart of Brooklyn. Grace stood outside the shop one evening, watching a line of customers wrap around the corner. The owner hugged her, sobbing. You saved me. How can I ever? Just bake, Grace said with a tired smile. That's payment enough. 1. The next day, her inbox exploded: new clients, media inquiries, collaboration offers. She didn't know it yet, but one of those emails would change everything. It was from a small business investor named Noah Sterling. His assistant wrote, Mr. Sterling came across your campaign. He'd like to meet for coffee. Grace hesitated. The name rang faintly familiar: Sterling Ventures, a Manhattan-based firm with a reputation for investing in ethical consumer brands. Real power, real reach. Too big for her world. She almost ignored it, thinking it was a mistake. But Maya urged her. Grace, what if it's real? You have to go. A week later, Grace walked into a cafe near Bryant Park, wearing her best thrifted blazer. Noah was already there, calm, unassuming, dressed in a navy sweater instead of a suit. He smiled warmly. I've read your story. You have an eye for authenticity. Most people sell products. You sell trust. Grace blinked, unsure what to say. I just try to make people seen. That's exactly why I want to invest, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Not to change what you do, just to help you do it louder. For a moment, Grace couldn't speak. No one had ever offered her help without strings. Why me? She asked softly. Noah leaned back. Because I believe in second beginnings. Grace left the cafe in a daze, clutching the folder. Outside, the city shimmered in late afternoon light. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. Back home, Lila ran into her arms. Grace lifted her daughter and whispered, We might be okay, baby. We really might. That night, she opened the folder again. A single note was scribbled at the bottom in neat handwriting. Sometimes the strongest people are the quietest survivors. Grace smiled through her tears. She didn't know yet. But this was the moment the tide began to turn. Summer had thickened into August heat, and Grace Miller's studio buzzed with new life. Miller and Muse was no longer just her, and a laptop. It was a small team working out of a shared office near Bryant Park. The logo she had designed on sleepless nights now glowed from the glass door. Clients came, investors called, and for the first time, Grace allowed herself to breathe. But peace never stayed long when Cole Harrington's shadow still stretched over her life. One humid evening, as Lila colored on the office floor and Grace finished tax paperwork, her printer jammed. She pulled at the stuck paper, only to find an old hospital form wedged between files she'd scanned months ago. At first, she barely noticed it until she saw the name at the top, Lenox Hill Medical Center, patient, Lila Miller Harrington. Her blood turned to ice. Harrington. Grace flipped the page. Under insurance information, it listed dependent of Cole Harrington, Sloan Pierce. Her hand shook so violently the page tore. Her ex-husband and his mistress had used her child's name to file under their policy. Fraud. Cold, methodical, deliberate fraud. She collapsed into her chair, nausea washing over her. How long had he known? How much had he taken? When Maya came in later, Grace was still sitting there, pale and trembling. What happened? Grace slid the paper across the desk. He claimed my daughter as his and hers. He used her name for his taxes. Her name, Maya. Maya's jaw dropped. That's illegal. That's insane. Grace grabbed her phone and called Dana Cho. The lawyer answered immediately, her voice alert even through static. "Send me everything," Dana said. "Don't tell anyone else. If this checks out, he's in deep trouble." An hour later, Dana called back. "Grace, it's real. I ran the tax database. Cole and Sloan filed a dependent claim matching Lila's birth date, just under a different last name. It's money laundering dressed as family insurance. If we take this to court, it opens everything." Grace pressed a hand to her chest. Her pulse raced with anger and disbelief. "He used my child." Again, Dana's tone softened. "Grace, this could finally be your leverage. But you have to move carefully. Quietly. If he senses what you know, he'll bury the evidence before we can use it." Falling. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, the city glowing in restless neon below. Her laptop screen reflected her face stronger now, but still scarred. She opened a new folder titled Receipts. Inside, she stored the hospital file, the scanned tax forms, and screenshots of Cole's past threats. Then she recorded a voice memo for herself. "He stole your name once. He won't steal hers." The next morning, she called Dr. Patel at Lenox Hill. "Doctor, can I ask something sensitive? Did anyone request copies of my daughter's birth file besides me?" There was a pause. Then Dr. Patel said softly, "Yes. About a year ago. Someone from the Harrington Foundation's HR department requested a verification letter. I thought it was for benefits." Grace gripped the counter to steady herself. "Thank you," she whispered. When she hung up, she looked across the room at Lila, who was drawing a picture of their small apartment. "That's our castle," Lila said proudly. Grace smiled weakly, tears stinging her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, and we're going to protect it." She emailed Dana one line. "We go to war, but in silence." Then she opened her MacBook and began writing a timeline of every lie, every threat, every stolen piece of her life. The war had officially begun. Autumn crept into New York with amber leaves and the promise of change. Grace Miller felt it in her bones, the quiet storm before something big. After weeks of sleepless nights collecting evidence against Cole, she was exhausted but focused. Miller and Muse was gaining attention, yet the past still lingered like smoke. She needed to shift the narrative to prove that her story wasn't tragedy, but transformation. That's when the call came. A women's shelter in Brooklyn reached out, saying they'd seen her bakery campaign. Their funding was on the verge of collapse, and they needed a rebrand before year's end. "We can't pay," the director said, voice trembling. "But we can give you credit and our gratitude." Grace looked at Lila playing with her crayons on the floor. "That's enough," she said. For the next 3 weeks, Grace threw herself into the project. She met with survivors, listened to their stories, and saw pieces of herself in every trembling smile. She designed posters with the tagline, "You survived the night. Let the morning find you." The images were raw hands clasped, faces half-lit, courage made visible. Maya helped photograph the campaign using her old Canon camera. Dana reviewed every contract to make sure no one could steal Grace's work again. Together, they built something real, something no amount of money could fake. When the campaign launched, Grace barely expected anyone to notice. But within 48 hours, it exploded online. Journalists called it the most human piece of advertising New York has seen this year. A video montage of survivors telling their stories went viral, racking up millions of views. The shelter received more donations in a week than in the entire previous year. Grace watched the numbers rise on her laptop, tears spilling down her cheeks. It wasn't just about business anymore, it was about purpose. Then came the message that changed everything. Her assistant forwarded an email titled Opportunity. Inside, a single line read, "Mr. Noah Sterling would like to meet to discuss your next move." The name still startled her. The quiet billionaire who had once taken her to coffee now wanted a second meeting. She reread the email 3 times, half convinced it was a mistake. But the address Park Avenue was very real. That evening, she dressed carefully. A simple navy dress, her hair pulled back. She couldn't afford luxury, but she carried dignity like armor. When she entered the glass office, Noah stood by the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his tone as calm as the first time they met. "You've built something extraordinary, Grace," he said. "Do you realize your work saved lives this month?" She tried to brush it off. "It was the women who saved themselves." He smiled. And you reminded them they could. Hall? He handed her a small card with his personal number. I'd like to fund your studio. Quietly, under your name. No strings. You'll retain control. Consider it fuel for your next story. Grace stared at the card, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you helping me? Because, Noah said softly, I know what it looks like when someone survives a war and still builds beauty from the ashes. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Grace nodded. All right. Let's build. Over the next weeks, Sterling Ventures became an invisible ally, sending clients, resources, and credibility. Grace never flaunted it. She simply worked harder. When a journalist later asked about her sudden rise, Grace smiled and said only, "Good work finds its way." Across the city, Cole Harrington saw her face on a billboard for the campaign, the same face he'd once humiliated. His jaw tightened. Who's backing her? He muttered. Sloane shrugged, uneasy. Whoever it is, she's not done yet. And for the first time, Cole realized Grace Miller was no longer beneath him. She was above the skyline. The air in Manhattan grew colder, sharper, like it knew something was about to break. Grace Miller was everywhere, her campaign still dominating social media, her studio booked for months ahead. Miller and Muse had become a quiet revolution, helping small voices sound louder. Yet success had a cost. Fame, even the modest kind, had a way of attracting ghosts. One afternoon, as she returned from a client meeting near Central Park, Grace noticed a black Mercedes parked across the street. Her stomach tightened, the same car model Cole used to drive. She brushed it off as coincidence and walked faster, clutching Lila's hand. But that night, a message arrived. No sender, no subject, just 3 words. We should talk. She deleted it immediately. But the next morning, a man in a charcoal suit waited outside her office. Miss Miller, he said smoothly, flashing a card. I represent Mr. Harrington. He'd like to discuss a delicate matter. Grace's pulse jumped. Tell him I have nothing to say. The man smiled, unbothered. He has photos, Miss Miller. Private medical records. It would be a shame if the press thought you falsified documents during your pregnancy. She froze. That's a lie. Maybe. Maybe not. But the narrative depends on who tells it first. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a printed photo, her hospital file, the one showing Lila's last name listed under Harrington. Grace's vision blurred. The file she had discovered months ago, the very evidence of Cole's fraud. How did he get it? When she looked up, the man was gone. That evening, she called Dana Cho. He's threatening to leak the file, Grace said, voice shaking. He turned his own crime into a weapon. Fiven. Dana's voice was clipped, angry. Then we fight back smarter. Don't respond. Don't panic. Let him show his hand. But panic was already crawling under Grace's skin. Every time her phone buzzed, she imagined headlines, single mother fakes records, scams donors. Cole had done this before, twisting truth until it bent in his favor. 2 nights later, the unthinkable happened. Lila's elementary school called. Miller, your daughter hasn't been picked up yet. Did you send someone else? Grace's blood ran cold. No. She dropped everything and ran. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she burst through the school gates, scanning the crowd. No Lila, no familiar faces, just chaos. Then, in the distance, a police cruiser screeched to a stop. A small figure stepped out, crying, "Mommy!" Grace ran, scooping Lila into her arms, sobbing with relief. An officer explained that a man claiming to be her driver had tried to take Lila. Thankfully, a teacher recognized Grace's usual babysitter and called 911. The suspect fled before arrest. At the station, Grace gave her statement, trembling. Did you get a license plate? The officer nodded grimly. Yes. Registered to Harrington Enterprises. Her knees nearly gave out. He hadn't just threatened her. He had acted. Dana met her outside the station with coffee and fury. He crossed a line, Grace. This isn't intimidation anymore, it's criminal. We're going public. Grace shook her head. Not yet. I want him to believe I'm scared. I want him comfortable enough to slip. Maya hugged her tight. You're playing with fire. Grace wiped her tears. Then let him burn first. That night, she tucked Lila into bed and sat by the window, phone glowing in the dark. She typed one message and sent it to Noah Sterling. He made his move. "I'm ready to make mine." "One," Noah replied instantly. "Then let's make sure the world finally sees who he really is." Grace stared at the city lights, anger and resolve flooding her veins. The hunted woman had just become the hunter. The next morning, Manhattan felt colder than usual. Grace Miller sat in Dana Cho's office, staring at a wall covered in legal documents and photos. The fluorescent lights buzzed above them, slicing through the silence. The police report lay open on the desk, the failed kidnapping attempt, the blackmail threats, the hospital fraud. Every piece pointed to one man, Cole Harrington. Dana leaned forward, her voice calm but dangerous. "He's spiraling, Grace. The kind of man who's losing control of the story. That's when they make mistakes." Grace clenched her fists. "He already made one. He touched my daughter." Maya, sitting beside her, whispered, "Then let's finish this." But Dana lifted a hand. Not with emotion, with strategy. She opened a folder and revealed a printed email chain. One Grace had never seen before. Noah's people traced a message sent from Sloan Pierce's account to a Harrington Foundation donor. In it, they discussed transferring charity funds to a private shell company. Grace's heart skipped. Embezzlement? Exactly, and it links directly to Cole's tax filings. "We have enough for federal attention, but we need proof that he coordinated it." 1. Grace took a deep breath. "And we get that how?" Dana tapped her pen against the desk. "By making him overconfident. You're going to act like the frightened ex-wife again. Let him think he's winning. He'll reach out, gloat, and we'll be ready." Grace swallowed hard. "You want me to talk to him?" Maya's eyes widened. "Dana, that's dangerous." Dana didn't flinch. "It's controlled danger. We'll record it. The minute he admits involvement, we'll hand it to the FBI." "Fine." Grace hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Fine. Let's end this." 2 nights later, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone. The baby monitor glowed beside her. Lila, sleeping soundly. Grace's stomach twisted as she typed a short message. "Cole, please stop. You've already hurt us enough." The reply came within minutes. "You should have stayed quiet. Meet me tomorrow. Noon. The River Calf. No lawyers." Whoa. The next day, Grace arrived early, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs. The River Calf looked the same as it did years ago. Polished glasses, Manhattan glittering across the water. A place where people toasted to success, not ruin. Cole walked in wearing a navy suit, sunglasses, and that same smug smirk that once made her feel small. But not today. "Grace," he said smoothly, sitting across from her. "You've caused me a lot of trouble." "When?" "You kidnapped my daughter," she replied, voice steady. He laughed lightly. "Let's not dramatize. She was never in danger. I just wanted your attention." Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. The small recorder hidden in her jacket blinked red. "You also filed her under your insurance," she said. "Why for money?" Cole leaned forward, arrogance dripping from his tone. "Because I could. Because you walked away from my world and thought you could survive without me. Everything you touch still carries my name." Grace's pulse thundered. There it was. The confession. The hubris. She stared at him coldly. "Not anymore." Cole smirked. "We'll see." He stood, dropped $100 bill on the table, and left. The second he walked out, Dana's voice buzzed in Grace's ear through the hidden earpiece. "We got it. Every word. Sending it now." Have. By that evening, the FBI had a copy of the recording, along with the fraudulent financial files Noah's investigators had traced. Grace sat in her car outside Lila's school when Dana called. "It's done," Dana said softly. "They're opening a formal investigation." Grace closed her eyes, gripping the steering wheel. The fear that had haunted her for years began to crack, replaced by something sharp and powerful: justice. She looked at the school doors as Lila ran out, smiling wide. Grace knelt, hugging her tight. "We're safe now," she whispered. "He can't touch us again." Behind her, the city skyline shimmered, and somewhere inside those towers, Cole's empire had just begun to crumble. The storm finally began to move, but not the one outside. This one was public, viral, and merciless. Within a week of the FBI inquiry, whispers about the Harrington Foundation's accounting irregularities began surfacing across Wall Street circles. Cole, ever the manipulator, moved quickly. He issued press statements, smiled for cameras, and blamed clerical misunderstandings. But it wasn't enough. Behind the scenes, Sloane Pierce was unraveling. The woman who once smirked behind Cole's shoulder now spent sleepless nights deleting old emails, calling lawyers, and scanning her phone for leaks. The empire she helped build on lies was cracking, and Cole had just decided she'd be the first to fall. Grace Miller didn't expect sympathy for Sloane. But when Dana Cho called one night, her voice cautious, Grace knew something had shifted. "Grace," Dana said. Sloane reached out. "She wants a meeting." Grace blinked. "What? Why?" "She says she has information contracts, bank statements, internal memos. Proof that Cole used multiple charities to move money offshore." Grace's jaw tightened. "Why help me now?" Dana sighed. "Because he's throwing her under the bus. She's facing charges that should be his." Grace stared out her window at the Manhattan skyline, glowing gold against the dusk. "Fine," she said finally. "Set it up." The meeting took place in a dim cafe in Soho. Sloane looked nothing like the woman Grace remembered from that divorce office years ago. No designer suit, no smug smile. Her hair was messy. Her hands trembled as she stirred her coffee. "You came alone," Grace said. Sloane gave a small, bitter laugh. "I don't have anyone else left." Grace folded her arms. "You helped him destroy me. You forged my medical records. You called me crazy to the press. Why should I trust anything you say now?" Sloane's eyes welled with tears. "Because I believed him. He said you were unstable, vindictive. I was stupid and ambitious." She pulled out a USB drive and slid it across the table. "Everything's on here. Emails, signatures, money trails. He made me sign half of them." Grace hesitated. "Why now?" Sloane's voice cracked. "Because I just got a subpoena. And Cole's lawyers sent me a message. Take the fall, or we ruin you. He's already leaking my name to the press." Grace stared at the small silver drive. Her fingers hovered over it, conflicted. Mercy or justice, which was stronger? Finally, she picked it up. "You're right about one thing," she said softly. "He ruins people. But not this time." Sloane let out a breath that was almost a sob. "What will you do with it?" Grace stood. "I'll do what you never did. The right thing." That night, she and Dana spent hours reviewing the files. It was worse than anyone imagined. Charitable donations funneled into shell companies, fake invoices, false payrolls. Enough evidence to bury Cole Harrington for good. At midnight, Grace leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. This could end him. Dana smiled grimly. Then it's time the world met the real Cole. Gender sewed. 2 days later, the media firestorm erupted. Leaked documents, internal emails, and donation records flooded every major outlet. Sloane's name appeared first, but this time, she wasn't silent. She went on record, admitting her role and exposing Cole's coercion. Her tearful interview aired on national television. "I believed in the man I loved. I didn't see the monster I served." Cole responded with fury, calling her a disgruntled employee. But the world wasn't buying his act anymore. Investors began pulling out, partners distanced themselves, and the once pristine Harrington name was now synonymous with scandal. That evening, Grace stood in front of her office window, watching headlines scroll across the Times Square billboards. Cole Harrington, under federal investigation. She felt no joy, only quiet release. Maya called from the other room. "Grace, it's starting." Grace smiled faintly. Let him watch himself fall. And somewhere in his penthouse, Cole finally realized the woman he'd underestimated was the one holding the match. Winter returned to New York dressed in glitter and gold. The Central Park Benefit Gala, the same one that once marked Cole Harrington's rise, was back again. But this year, the invitations carried a different tone. The press whispered about investigations, missing funds, and scandal. Yet Cole, stubborn and arrogant, refused to retreat. "Public image is everything," he told his assistant. "If I show up confident, they'll believe I'm innocent." What he didn't know was that the gala would become his stage of destruction. Grace Miller hadn't planned to attend. But 2 weeks before the event, the committee chair reached out. "Miss Miller, your campaign saved hundreds of women this year. We'd be honored if you'd present an award." Her heart skipped. The same ballroom where she had once been humiliated as Cole's trembling wife. Now she'd walk in as the keynote speaker. It felt poetic, dangerous, and right. Maya grinned when Grace told her. If karma had a calendar, this would be the date circled in red. Dana, ever the realist, warned, "Be careful, he'll try something. Always assume he's planning a counterattack." Grace nodded. "Then let him come. I'm done running." 1. The night of the gala glittered with Manhattan luxury chandeliers, champagne flutes, camera flashes bouncing off sequined gowns. Grace arrived in a simple black dress, elegant and sharp, her hair pulled into a sleek bun. No diamonds, no flash, just quiet confidence. Noah Sterling walked beside her, calm as ever, in a tailored navy tuxedo. "Ready?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I've been ready for 8 years." "Fun." Across the room, Cole stood near the bar, smiling for cameras, Sloane nowhere in sight. His Rolex gleamed as he shook hands with donors, but his eyes darted nervously toward Grace. He hadn't expected her to come. When she walked past him, their eyes met for the first time in nearly a decade. His smirk faltered. She nodded politely and kept walking. That small actor indifference cut deeper than anything she could have said. The speeches began. Laughter, applause, the usual flattery. Then Grace's name was announced. She walked to the podium under a hush of whispers. Reporters raised their phones. Cole's jaw tightened. "Good evening," Grace began, voice calm but steady. 8 years ago, I was just a woman trying to survive. Tonight, I stand not as a victim, but as proof that truth, no matter how buried, always finds its way to light." The room stilled. Cameras flashed. And then, on the massive LED screen behind her, something changed. The slideshow, which was meant to play images of the charity's work, flickered. For a split second, Grace thought it was a glitch. But then, the audio began. Cole's voice. "Because I could. Because she walked away from my world and thought she could survive without me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The room erupted. Dana's voice came through Grace's earpiece from the tech booth. "It's live." Someone fed the recording to the event stream. Grace didn't flinch. She turned slowly toward Cole. His face had gone ghost white. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Mr. Harrington, is that your voice? Did you falsify charity funds?" Cole tried to smile, but his voice cracked. This is manipulation. A setup." Security moved in as chaos swelled. Noah stepped beside Grace, shielding her from the crowd. Dana whispered, "Federal agents are already here. Just step aside." Grace stood motionless as 2 men in dark suits approached Cole. "Cole Harrington, you're under arrest for financial fraud and attempted kidnapping." The flash of handcuffs was met with a silence so sharp it felt sacred. Cole's eyes met Grace's as they led him away. Rage, disbelief, and something else. Recognition. He had finally lost. Grace exhaled, the weight of years leaving her shoulders all at once. The ballroom lights glowed gold again, but this time they belonged to her. And as the cameras turned to capture her calm face, Grace Miller became the story, not the scandal. The morning after the gala, Manhattan woke up to headlines that read like fiction. Tech mogul Cole Harrington arrested mid-gala. FBI confirms financial fraud, charity embezzlement, and kidnapping attempt. Every major network replayed the same footage. Cole being escorted out of the Plaza Ballroom in handcuffs, cameras flashing, his face pale and tight with disbelief. For years, he had been untouchable, the man with perfect suits, perfect quotes, perfect lies. But now, the mask was gone. Grace Miller sat on her couch with a blanket around her shoulders. Lila snuggled beside her, the TV light flickering across their faces. She muted the sound. She didn't need to hear it again. She just wanted silence. Maya walked in with 2 coffees. "They're saying he'll be charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. That's federal time, Grace." "Oui." Grace didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, on the man who once promised her everything and delivered only scars. "It's strange," she whispered. I thought I'd feel victory. But all I feel is empty. Maya sat beside her. That's not emptiness. That's peace. The doorbell rang. When Grace opened it, Noah Sterling stood there, his calm presence filling the space like quiet light. He held a small envelope. You should see this, he said. Inside were printed emails, evidence the FBI had uncovered overnight. Cole had been secretly funneling donations meant for Grace's campaign into fake shell accounts under Sloane's name. It wasn't just greed, it was revenge. He wanted to ruin her success from within. Grace's chest tightened. He tried to use my own work to destroy me. Noah nodded. But in doing that, he created the digital trail they needed to convict him. Every crime he committed led straight back to you. Your paper trail. Your organization. Your persistence. You didn't just survive, Grace. You built the very net that caught him. Her throat closed with emotion. I didn't want to win this way. Noah met her gaze gently. Sometimes justice doesn't look like joy. It looks like freedom. Later that day, Grace received a call from Sloane Pierce. Her voice was small, broken. They let me go. I cooperated. I told them everything. I wanted to thank you for not ruining me when you could. Grace hesitated, then said softly, we were both prisoners of the same man. Just different cells. Sloane sniffled. He called me last night from custody. Still blames everyone but himself. You were right to walk away, Grace. I never did. When the call ended, Grace looked out her apartment window at the city below. Snow was falling again, soft and silent. For the first time in 8 years, the world felt still. By evening, the news cycle had shifted from shock to analysis. Commentators dissected Grace's rises, her transformation from abandoned wife to female entrepreneur of the year. The irony was poetic. The woman he tried to erase had become the symbol of everything he could never be. That night, a car pulled up outside her building. Noah stepped out again, this time with something unexpected, a small Tiffany box. He placed it on the coffee table. Grace frowned. What's this? Not what you think, Noah said with a half smile. Inside the box was a delicate silver key. It's to your new office. Sterling Ventures just secured space for Miller and Muse Midtown, corner view, sunlight all day. It's yours. Grace stared at the key, tears gathering in her eyes. Why me? Because you turned pain into power, Noah said quietly. And the world needs more of that. R.D.S. Grace looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, Thank you for seeing me before the world did. He smiled. Grace, the world's just catching up. As he left, she turned off the TV, tucked Lila into bed, and finally allowed herself to exhale. Cole was behind bars. The lies were done. The noise was gone. And for the first time in 8 years, Grace Miller slept without fear. For weeks, the city couldn't stop talking about Grace Miller. Her name trended beside headlines that once belonged to her ex-husband, the woman who took down a mogul. Grace Miller, from scandal to strength. But while the world turned her story into a symbol, Grace just wanted her life back. Every morning, she walked Lila to school through the cold Manhattan air, trying to enjoy the small things again, the crunch of snow under boots, the smell of coffee from the corner cafe, her daughter's laugh echoing off brick walls. Yet wherever she went, people stared. Some whispered with admiration, others with curiosity. She'd become a living headline. At Miller and Muse, things moved faster than ever. The studio had exploded with new clients, ethical brands, nonprofits, women-led startups. Investors called daily. Dana handled the legal inquiries, while Maya screened potential clients to make sure no one was trying to exploit Grace's fame. People love your story, Maya said one morning, dropping a pile of proposal letters on Grace's desk. But they're buying your name, not your message. Be careful. Grace nodded, flipping through the papers. Each one was an opportunity, but also a temptation to turn her pain into a brand. She closed the folder. We'll only take work that matters, she said. If it doesn't help someone, we pass. That night, she appeared on a major talk show for her first live interview. The studio lights were blinding, the host charming and polished. Grace Miller, he began, you've become an inspiration for millions of women who feel powerless. Tell us, what's your secret? Grace smiled faintly. There's no secret. I just refuse to stay silent. The audience applauded, but her hands trembled under the table. She hated the word inspiration. It made her sound untouchable, when all she'd done was survive. When the cameras cut, the host leaned closer. You know, a book deal could change everything. A movie, maybe. Hollywood loves redemption arcs. Grace forced a polite smile. I'm not for sale. After the interview, she met Noah Sterling for dinner at a quiet restaurant near Bryant Park. He watched her push her salad around the plate. You don't look happy, he said. I should be, she admitted. Cole's gone. I have my company, my daughter, my peace. But now, everyone wants a piece of my story. They want to own it, twist it, profit from it. Noah nodded thoughtfully. Fame is just another kind of prison. The trick is learning when to step outside the spotlight. Grace looked up at him, her eyes softening. You really think I can? I think you already did, he said, smiling. You turned pain into purpose. That's not something you can lose. Days later, she received an unexpected letter, handwritten, postmarked from a federal detention center. The handwriting was unmistakable. Cole. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page. Grace, congratulations. You won. But remember, victims always need villains. When I'm gone, who will you be? Her hands shook as she tore the letter in half and dropped it into the trash. She whispered to herself, free. That evening, she visited the River Cafe, the same place where Cole once bragged about owning the city. Now, she sat by the window, watching the skyline shimmer across the water. Lila drew pictures beside her, humming softly. Dana texted her a link. Justice served. Harrington sentenced to 15 years. Grace exhaled, a quiet smile breaking through. He finally ran out of lies, she murmured. Lila looked up. What'd you say, Mom? Nothing, baby, Grace said, kissing her daughter's hair. Just that it's over. Outside, Manhattan's lights glittered on the river like tiny promises. Grace looked at her reflection in the glass, stronger, freer, whole. And for the first time, she didn't see the woman who survived him. She saw the woman who replaced him with peace. A soft February rain fell over Manhattan, washing the city in silver. Grace Miller stood by the window of her new Midtown office's floor-to-ceiling glass, morning light spilling across the polished wood floors. The space smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Miller and Muse had come a long way from the tiny Queens apartment where it began. Dana entered with her tablet. You've got 3 offers on the table, she said. A book deal, a documentary, and a luxury brand wanting you as their resilience ambassador. Whatever that means. Grace laughed softly. It means they want my story without my scars. Dana smiled. So, what do you want? Grace turned toward the skyline. Peace, she said simply. I just want to build, not explain. Before Dana could reply, the office phone buzzed. It's Noah Sterling, Maya called from the reception area. He says it's important. Grace picked up, her heart tightening slightly. Noah's calm voice came through the line. Grace, I'm stopping by in 10 minutes. Don't schedule anything else. When he arrived, he looked different, less polished, more human. His tie hung loose, his expression unreadable. He placed a folder on her desk and leaned back against the window. I've got an offer, he said. Grace crossed her arms. If this is about the Sterling partnership, we already signed that agreement. Johnning. It's not business, Noah said quietly. It's legacy. He opened the folder, revealing a proposal stamped with the Sterling Ventures logo. We're building a new initiative, an incubator for women-owned creative agencies. I want you to lead it, not as an employee, but as a partner. You'll have full authority, full funding, full freedom. Grace blinked, stunned. That's huge. Noah, you could have anyone. I don't want anyone, he said. I want someone who knows what rebuilding really means. You didn't climb your way back. You carried others with you. That's leadership. Grace hesitated. If I take this, I'll be under your company's name. People will say I used you to get here. Noah chuckled softly. They already said that. Let them. You don't owe the world explanations. You owe yourself peace. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the city below. Grace looked down at the papers. Every instinct screamed that this was the opportunity she'd dreamed of, but fear lingered. Trusting again felt like walking barefoot over glass. Finally, she asked, "Why do you believe in me so much?" Noah's gaze softened. "Because you believed in everyone but yourself for too long." Grace exhaled slowly, then smiled faintly. "All right. Let's build it. But on one condition, my name stays first on the letterhead." "Non-negotiable," he said, grinning. They shook hands. It felt less like a deal, and more like a promise. That evening, after the office emptied, Grace sat alone with a glass of red wine, reviewing the paperwork. The rain tapped gently against the windows. Her phone buzzed a message from Noah. "Sometimes the right partnership isn't about power, it's about peace." She smiled at the screen. For the first time in years, the idea of partnership didn't scare her. As she locked the office, her reflection shimmered against the dark glass. The woman staring back wasn't the abandoned wife or the survivor. She was the architect of her own empire. Outside, taxis splashed through puddles, and neon lights reflected off the wet pavement. Grace tightened her coat and whispered to herself, "We're just getting started." And somewhere deep down, she knew this offer wasn't just about business. It was the beginning of something far more personal. Spring returned to Manhattan, bright and merciless. The cherry blossoms along Fifth Avenue had begun to bloom, painting the streets in pale pink petals. Grace Miller walked slowly toward the Plaza Hotel, the very place where 8 years ago she'd signed away her marriage and torn a pregnancy test in half under its golden canopy. Now, she was walking back through those same revolving doors. But this time, her name was on the guest list, not the divorce papers. Inside, the grand lobby glowed beneath chandeliers. A concierge greeted her warmly. "Welcome back to the Plaza, Miss Miller. Your conference suite is ready." The words hit her like music. For a moment, she stood still, letting them sink in. The last time she was here, she'd been trembling, humiliated, pregnant, and alone. Now, she was hosting a business summit for women entrepreneurs funded by the very incubator she and Noah Sterling had built. She pressed the elevator button and smiled faintly. "Full circle," she whispered. Upstairs, the ballroom bustled with energy. Her team arranged name tags and portfolios. The Miller and Muse logo projected in gold light across the walls. Maya directed the staff while Dana checked last-minute contracts. "You realize," Dana said, glancing at her, "you're officially on the same floor where your ex signed those fraudulent charity deals." "Poetic, huh?" Grace chuckled softly. "I prefer the word satisfying." As she reviewed the schedule, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Enjoying the spotlight? C.H. 1. Her chest tightened, though she knew he couldn't reach her. Cole was still in prison 15 years, no parole, but he had a way of slithering into her peace. She locked the phone, exhaled, and turned her focus back to the event. The summit began at noon. Grace stood on stage in front of hundreds of women founders, designers, small business owners, each one holding their own story of survival. She looked out across the crowd and said, 8 years ago, I walked into this hotel thinking I'd lost everything. Today, I stand here to tell you that loss isn't the end. It's the beginning you never saw coming." The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, but Grace barely noticed. Her gaze drifted to the back of the ballroom where Noah stood, watching quietly. Their eyes met, and he smiled steady, proud. After the keynote, Grace walked off stage, adrenaline still racing. Noah approached, offering her a glass of champagne. "You know," he said, "it's poetic justice that the woman Cole tried to silence is now the loudest voice in the room." Grace laughed. "Poetic and expensive. Have you seen the Plaza's catering invoice?" Noah grinned. "Worth every penny." They stepped out onto the terrace overlooking Central Park. The air smelled of rain and lilac. Grace leaned on the railing, gazing at the skyline that once felt like a cage. "When I was here last, I thought my life was ending," she said softly. "I didn't know I was just clearing space for something better." Noah looked at her, eyes gentle. "You didn't rebuild, Grace. You reinvented." She turned toward him, the weight of gratitude filling her chest. "And why did you help me when you didn't have to?" He smiled. Because you reminded me what integrity looks like in a city that forgot the word. They stood in silence for a moment, the world below humming with life. Then Grace reached into her bag, pulling out an old object, Cole's Mont Blanc pen, the one he'd forced her to sign the divorce with years ago. She placed it on the railing. "This belonged to my past," she said, flicking it gently over the edge. The pen disappeared into the trees below. Noah chuckled softly. "Symbolic, huh?" Grace smiled. "Necessary." As the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers, the ballroom doors opened again, and applause filled the air. Grace took Noah's arm and whispered, "Let's get back. The future's waiting." And for the first time, the plaza didn't feel like a place of endings. It felt like homecoming. The morning after the plaza summit, Grace Miller's name was everywhere again, but this time, for all the right reasons. Headlines glowed across every major outlet. Grace Miller empowers thousands at Women in Business conference. From broken to bold. A comeback. 8 years in the making. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages of gratitude and admiration. Women from all over the country wrote to her, saying her story gave them strength to leave toxic marriages, start small businesses, or simply believe they could begin again. Grace sat in her new corner office, watching sunlight spill over Park Avenue. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile, not the polite smile for cameras, but a real one. The kind that comes from surviving the impossible, yet fame came with its own weight. That afternoon, she was scheduled to appear on The Morning View, one of the most watched daytime shows in America. Dana and Maya prepped her carefully, warning her that the host was known for prying questions. "Stay calm, stay real," Dana said, adjusting Grace's microphone. "They'll try to make this about Cole. Don't let them. Make it about you." Grace nodded, heart steady. "It's time people stopped defining me by his name." The studio lights were bright, almost blinding. The host greeted her with a dazzling smile. "Grace Miller," she said. "You've become a household name, a symbol of strength. But let's be honest. When you signed those divorce papers 8 years ago, did you ever imagine this moment?" Grace paused. "No," she said simply. "Back then, I couldn't imagine tomorrow. But pain can be a powerful teacher. It strips you of everything fake until you're left with what's real yourself." The audience applauded softly. The host leaned in. "Do you forgive him? Cole Harrington? The man who nearly destroyed you?" The question hit like a dart, but Grace didn't flinch. "Forgiveness," she said slowly, "isn't about setting the other person free. It's about setting yourself free from the anger that keeps you prisoner." The studio fell silent. Even the host seemed moved. "That's beautiful," she murmured. Grace continued, voice calm but strong. "Justice isn't revenge. It's peace with memory. And peace is what I finally have." The words rippled across social media within minutes. Viewers called it the most powerful live interview of the year. Grace's composure, her empathy, her refusal to hate all of it, resonated deeply. When the show ended, Grace stepped outside into the spring air, blinking against the sunlight. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but she wasn't rattled. She walked through them with quiet dignity. For once, the chaos didn't touch her. Later that day, she returned to her office to find Noah waiting by the window, a newspaper folded in his hands. "You handled that perfectly," he said. "No vengeance. No bitterness. Just grace." She smiled softly. "Maybe that's why my mother named me that." Noah handed her the paper. "You should see the op-ed. Grace Miller redefines power. You're not just a survivor anymore, you're a leader." Grace scanned the headline, her eyes misting. "Funny," she said quietly. "It took losing everything to realize power was never about control, it was about choice." Noah's gaze softened. "And you've made all the right ones." That evening, Grace met Maya and Dana at the River Cafe to celebrate. Lila joined them, twirling in her little blue dress. The city lights reflected off the Hudson River like diamonds scattered across the dark. As they toasted, Maya raised her glass. "To Grace Miller, the woman who taught us that starting over isn't weakness. It's wisdom." Grace clinked glasses and laughed. "To all of us for surviving the story and rewriting the ending." Across the river, the Manhattan skyline shimmered like a promise kept. And in that moment, Grace realized redemption wasn't something the world gave you, it was something you claimed for yourself. The week after her television appearance, Grace Miller's calendar overflowed with interviews, gala invites, and partnership requests. Miller and Muse had gone from a boutique agency to a nationwide movement, and every investor wanted to be part of her rise. But amidst the noise, one event loomed larger than the rest: the annual Philanthropy Awards at the Metropolitan Hall. Grace had been chosen to deliver the keynote speech, and ironically, the Harrington Foundation, now under new management, was one of the evening sponsors. Dana warned her, "You don't have to go. You've already proven your point." Grace smiled faintly. "That's exactly why I have to go. This isn't about proving anything anymore. It's about closure." The night of the event, Manhattan shimmered under soft rain. Grace arrived in a sleek ivory gown, understated yet regal, her presence commanding quiet attention. The lobby buzzed with camera flashes and murmurs as she made her way inside, escorted by Noah Sterling. He leaned close and whispered, "Tonight, just breathe. You've already won." Grace nodded, though her pulse quickened as memories of old charity galas flooded back, the ones where she'd stood behind Cole, invisible, while he soaked up applause. Tonight, that power belonged to her. The ballroom was a sea of designer suits, champagne glasses, and murmured gossip. As she walked to the green room, she caught sight of a familiar figure near the exit: Sloane Pierce. Their eyes met briefly. Sloane gave a small nod, an unspoken truce. Grace returned it, quietly grateful that not everyone from the past had remained an enemy. The speech was scheduled for 8 p.m., but as Grace prepared backstage, a security guard approached her. "Miss Miller," he said cautiously, "there's someone here insisting on speaking to you, says it's urgent." Grace frowned. "Who?" Before the guard could answer, a voice came from the hallway, low, venomous, unmistakable. "You really thought you were done with me, didn't you?" Her heart stopped. Cole Harrington stood at the end of the corridor. His prison-issued suit had been replaced with a tailored gray one, his eyes hollow but burning with fury. "How did you?" she began. He smirked. "Early release for cooperation. Funny how justice works when you know the right people." Grace took a step back, pulse pounding. "You shouldn't be here." "I came to congratulate you," Cole said, his tone mocking. "Look at you, America's sweetheart. But tell me, Grace, how long before they realize you're just a scared girl with a new mask?" She straightened, her fear hardening into calm. "That girl you broke doesn't exist anymore." Cole stepped closer. "You think these people love you? They'll use you until the next scandal comes along. And when it does, I'll be there to watch you fall again." From behind him, Noah's voice cut through the tension. "No, you won't." He strode forward, flanked by 2 security officers. "The restraining order says 50 feet, Mr. Harrington. You just broke the law again." Cole's smirk faltered as the guards grabbed his arms. "You can't silence me forever," he snarled. Grace met his gaze one last time. "I don't need to. The world heard you loud and clear." As they dragged him away, Cole shouted, "You owe me everything you have." Grace turned, voice steady as steel. "No, Cole. I built everything you tried to destroy." When the corridor fell silent, she leaned against the wall, trembling not from fear, but from release. Noah touched her shoulder gently. "You okay?" Grace nodded slowly. "Yes. For the first time, I actually am." Minutes later, she walked onto the stage, applause rising like thunder. Cameras flashed as she began her speech, not about revenge, but about rebirth. "Every woman here," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, "has a story someone tried to silence. But silence is only power when you let it stay unbroken." The audience rose to their feet. In the shadows backstage, Noah watched her with quiet pride. And as the spotlight bathed her in gold, Grace Miller finally stood exactly where she was meant to be: untouched, unafraid, unstoppable. The morning after the Philanthropy Awards, New York City shimmered beneath a pale spring sun, its skyline sharp against a cloudless sky. Grace Miller woke to the soft sound of birds outside her window and the weight of something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. For the first time in almost a decade, she didn't wake to dread. She woke to freedom. Downstairs, Lila was already at the kitchen table, pouring cereal into her bowl and humming. "Mom," she said proudly, "my teacher showed the video from last night in class. Everyone said you were amazing." "Bah." Grace laughed, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Your teacher has excellent taste." Her phone buzzed with endless notifications, news headlines, interview requests, congratulatory messages, but she turned it face down on the counter. Today wasn't about the world. It was about breathing again. Maya arrived mid-morning, balancing 2 Starbucks cups and a pastry box. "Queen Grace," she teased. "How does it feel to trend worldwide again?" Grace smiled. "Like standing in sunlight after years underground." Dana joined them via video call, hair still wet from an early meeting. "Cole's stunt last night went viral," she reported. "Half the internet's calling it the Corridor Showdown. The footage from the event's security cameras leaked, and people are calling you the definition of composure." Grace rolled her eyes. "I didn't feel composed. I felt like punching him." Dana smirked. "Then thank God for your self-control. He's already been taken back into custody. Violating a restraining order while under parole? He's finished. No more appeals. No more power." Grace let out a slow breath. "Good. Maybe now he'll finally stop haunting me." "I am?" After the call, she and Maya took Lila to Central Park. The day was bright and cool. The air smelled of rain and magnolia blossoms. Families picnicked on the grass, cyclists glided past, and for once, Grace blended into the world like an ordinary person. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. Lila chased pigeons near Bethesda Fountain, laughing. Grace sat on a bench watching her daughter, the child who had once been born in the back seat of an Uber during a snowstorm, now free, fearless, happy. Her throat tightened with gratitude. Noah arrived a little later, holding a paper bag of pretzels. "I figured the hero of the hour might need breakfast," he said. Grace smiled. "You always know what I need before I do." They walked together along the path, their hands brushing occasionally. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Noah said quietly, "You know, I've seen people rebuild after ruin before, but I've never seen anyone do it with such grace." Grace looked at him, eyes soft. "I didn't rebuild alone." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Maybe not. But you're the reason everyone followed. You gave people hope, Grace, including me." She blinked, caught off guard. "You," he chuckled. "Even billionaires need someone to remind them why decency matters." Bah. They stood there for a moment, the city moving quietly around them. Then Lila ran over, tugging Grace's hand. "Mom, come on. There's a street musician playing our song." The three of them walked toward the fountain, where a violinist played a soft, familiar tune. Grace watched Lila dance in a swirl of sunlight, carefree and wild. Noah leaned close and said softly, "You know, happiness looks good on you." Grace smiled. "It feels strange but right." 1. When the music ended, applause filled the air. Grace turned to Noah, a flicker of something unspoken between them. For years, she'd avoided the idea of love. It had always meant pain, control, loss. But standing there, she realized love could look like this: quiet, respectful, healing. As they walked back toward the park gates, her phone buzzed again, an email from the governor's office, inviting her to join a statewide initiative for women entrepreneurs. She laughed in disbelief. "It never stops, does it?" Noah smiled. "Maybe the universe finally realized what you're worth." Grace took Lila's hand, the sunlight glinting on her face. "Then let's make sure it never forgets." And as they disappeared into the hum of the city, Grace Miller knew her story wasn't ending. It was only just beginning. 8 years. That was how long it had taken Grace Miller to rise from the ashes of her old life to the brilliance of this one. 8 years since the night she'd signed those divorce papers in tears, clutching a broken pregnancy test under the glittering lights of the plaza. Now, she stood beneath those same chandeliers again, but not as a victim. Tonight, she was the keynote honoree at the New York Women of Vision Gala, recognized for transforming pain into purpose. As the orchestra tuned softly, Grace looked out across the ballroom filled with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and media lights. The same city that once chewed her up now applauded her. She wore a silver gown, elegant but simple, her hair swept back, her expression calm and radiant. Noah Sterling stood nearby, adjusting his cufflinks, his eyes never leaving her. "Are you nervous?" he asked with that quiet steadiness she'd come to rely on. Not anymore, she said. I've already lived through the worst night of my life in this building. What's a speech compared to that? When her name was announced, applause filled the hall. Grace walked to the stage slowly, her heels clicking against marble, every step echoing the journey that had led her here. She paused at the podium, letting the room settle. 8 years ago, she began, I stood outside this very hotel, broken and terrified. I thought my story was over. But the truth is, sometimes the ending is just the invitation to begin again. The audience leaned forward. Cameras flashed. Her voice grew stronger. I've learned that strength doesn't come from revenge. It comes from the quiet decision to stand up when no one's watching. To choose integrity when the world expects bitterness. To build when destruction would be easier. People wiped tears from their eyes. Maya and Dana sat together near the front, smiling proudly. Lila, now 8 years old, watched from the VIP table, her small hands clasped around a single white rose. Grace glanced toward her daughter, her tone softening. Everything I've done, every risk, every sleepless night, was for the little girl who reminded me that love is still possible after betrayal. A standing ovation thundered through the ballroom. Grace stepped back, overwhelmed, as flashes from hundreds of cameras painted the moment in light. She looked at Noah, who mouthed silently, "You did it." After the ceremony, the crowd swarmed around her for photos and congratulations. But Grace slipped quietly out to the terrace overlooking Fifth Avenue. The night air was crisp, the skyline glittering like it had been cut from diamonds. For a long moment she simply breathed. Footsteps approached behind her. "I figured I'd find you out here," Noah said, joining her. He held a small box in his hand. She laughed softly. "Please tell me that's not another business contract." "Not this time." He opened it, revealing a slender Tiffany ring, elegant and understated. "It's not about saving or fixing anything. It's about starting something new, together." Grace froze, eyes filling with tears. "Noah, He shook his head. "You don't have to answer now. Just know that love doesn't have to hurt to be real." She looked at the ring glinting under the city lights, then back at him. For years, she'd built walls so high that no one could climb them. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let someone in who didn't want to own her, only stand beside her. Grace smiled through the tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's begin again." Noah slipped the ring onto her finger. Below them, the city lights reflected off the Hudson like 1,000 tiny promises. Grace leaned her head against his shoulder, the chaos of the world fading into quiet. She thought of the girl she'd once been, the one, crying in the rain with nothing but a torn chest and shattered dreams, and felt gratitude instead of grief. Because that girl had walked through the fire. And the woman standing here had learned how to shine. And as the music from the ballroom drifted into the night, Grace Miller finally understood her story had never been about loss. It had always been about becoming. So, that's how Grace's story ends. Or maybe, how it truly begins. If you're still here, my friend, then something in her journey must have touched a quiet place in your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own battles, the nights you thought you couldn't make it, and the mornings you did anyway. Grace taught us something powerful, that healing isn't loud, and strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just the whisper inside you that says, "I'll try again tomorrow." The Stoics said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." And that's exactly what Grace lived. Every pain became her path forward. You don't need revenge to rise. You don't need perfection to be worthy. You just need to keep showing up for yourself, even when no one else does. So if you're facing something heavy tonight, remember, you can rebuild, you can begin again. If this story moved you even a little, give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We remind each other that it's never too late to heal, to rise, and to start again.